We'll just jump right in. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We really appreciate it. I know that I sound probably like a broken record because this has been months and months of the same sort of messaging. However, obviously, we know that the numbers have been incredibly concerning. It was just a few days ago that we actually had 17 deaths. And so it really has to be a reminder that we've got to do everything we can to help our healthcare system weather this storm. Now, obviously, the good news is hope is here, and many of you have been reporting on the vaccine and our healthcare workers that are receiving it. And so I'm grateful that you have been doing story. I think it's been really, really helpful to sort of send that message of hope, because I think for so long we felt a lot of despair. But I still need to remind everyone, again, here we are at Christmas time. And I think the biggest gift that you can give someone is the gift of health and security, and making sure that right now it's tough. It's not only tough for our healthcare workers, but it's tough for our businesses. We know that they are struggling. I mean, I think right now it's just so many people are struggling, and people are tired. And it's just been a really challenging time for all of us in the community. But we've got to band together right now and keep wearing our masks, social distancing, and really being aware of our surroundings. But it's one of those things where we just have to keep reiterating the message. So today we have some incredible, talented guests. We've got Dr. Winchell, which I don't think you've met her before, but she is amazing and beautiful and talented, and we're so lucky to have her. She's on the front lines with St. Mary's. We've got Dr. Ariel, who, he is a well-known pediatrician here in town, and Dr. John Hess for general practice. He's amazing with Pinnacle Health, and I don't know if you follow him on Facebook, but he is tremendous and a wealth of information, like all of our guests here. And Dr. Jeremy Smith with the COVID meter, Dr. Deetra, I like to call you by your first name. And he has been doing the predictive model with Dr. Ariel. And I think it's been pretty fascinating what you have been able to accomplish with the predictive model. And so I'm going to let you talk about that. And then obviously I have Councilwoman Doer, who's been heading up our subcommittees, doing a tremendous job. So thank you so much, Councilwoman Doer. Okay, I'm going to start. We always start with the COVID risk meter, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing right now. Dr. Smith, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Shi, very much, and thanks for the opportunity this morning. I'd like to actually turn it over to Councilwoman Doer to kind of kick us off on the risk meter conversation, please.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Mayor. I think in terms of messaging, you'll hear the details from Jeremy and then Aditya. But the bottom line is that our COVID risk meter remains in the very high position for the week. We saw some improvements last week. We got excited, but it's right back up there. And so there's really no change there. In fact, we're right back a point away, a tick away, as we say, from purple. There's some good news and bad news. I was thinking about how to characterize our system with our healthcare. And I started thinking about it in terms of an airplane, which our doctors, our nurses have flown thousands of miles on one tank of gas. And I really think they need to come in for a landing. They need a rest. They're running out of gas. And so they performed extremely well and they continue to do their job, but they do need to refuel. We all do. And so I think the good news is that treatments are being refined and there are fewer deaths that we're seeing overall. And I would say the bad news is that any COVID is bad COVID due to the mayor often talks about the long haulers or the subsequent impacts that a person may have if they have COVID, even if they were asymptomatic. And so with that, we are inspired, as the mayor said, with the vaccine on the horizon, in fact, present, and we're inspired by the ability to better treat patients. And we're challenged, of course, with our staffing. So with that, Jeremy's going to actually walk you through the numbers.
Thank you, Councilwoman Doer. This is Jeremy Smith, Director of Regional Planning. I'm going to share the screen and take you through a quick slideshow, and I will do my best to be succinct and brief. Okay, so as always, you can find the risk meter website at covidriskmeter.org. And we are, as Councilman Maduro mentioned, still in the very high. Every Monday now, we kind of changed our protocol several weeks back to kind of set the risk setting for a week. And that's based on the performance of the model the previous week. And so we did have a couple of days that dipped below into maybe what this area that we were hopefully heading to the second tick. In fact, we came right back up. And so according to our protocols, we're still in the very high second tick, one half point actually at this point away from hitting that purple zone. And so let's take a look at the 5 indicators and how we've gotten here and what's going on. So there is a little bit of hope in the first 3 indicators in terms of what we might call stabilization or maybe slight downward trend. So this is risk assessments from the health district. You can see the 14-day average is this dashed line that peaked back in late November. And since then it's been somewhat lower. So it's still well above our top threshold of 400. But if this dashed line could get below this line, then we might start seeing some of that risk measure going down. That would mean that less people are calling in to get tests. Test positivity is another measure that, it's obviously very important. And it seems to have at least stabilized a slight downward trend in the past few days. It's been going down by a couple of tenths of a percent. Still very high, though, at around 20%. Our highest model threshold is 12%. So we have a long way to go to get out of that. But it is encouraging that it's flattening to some degree. Likewise, this is a graph showing new cases daily per 100,000 people. We had a huge peak right around before and after Thanksgiving. We think some of that could be due to the fact that folks really wanted to get tested in advance of Thanksgiving so they could travel or be with their family. And it may reflect to some degree that signal. And we've put this blue line in here that's really quite movable, but it's just to kind of show that we are kind of, since the beginning of November, we've been in this sort of elevated case escalation phase. And so a little bit of hope, though, that it does seem to be heading down. So we're watching that closely and hopefully it continues the downward trend. Not as good of a scenario here in terms of the 4th indicator, which is the medical interventions. And so this indicator describes folks going to the hospital or folks going into an ICU bed because of COVID. And the blue line is a 7-day average of total COVID hospitalizations is an all-time high right now, over 400 in the hospital in the North region. Likewise, you can see the orange line here is the ICU bed use due to COVID. That's also been going up, approaching 100 folks in the ICUs due to COVID. And so let's take a look a little closer at that. This is going back to July 1. And what we've got here is in the orange line at the top here is indicative of the total number of patients in the hospitals in the North region based on the Nevada Hospital Association. And then the blue chunk is the COVID patients. And so what you can see is that since the end of October, beginning of November, we've had a pretty significantly steep rise in the number of COVID patients in the hospital. And they're starting to take up more and more of a share of the total population of the hospital. Right now at about 35% of total patients have tested positive for COVID. Similar scenario in the ICU, even more severe in some ways. So back to July 1 as well. The orange line indicates total ICU occupancy. And then so upwards of, maxing out around 160, 170 up in there. Right now, over 50% of the folks in the ICU in our North region hospitals have COVID. And so you can see that with the blue. So both of those things continue to go up. Likewise, this is sort of a confusing graph, but we're tracking the hospital capacity measure based on data from the Nevada Hospital Association. We've been looking at that in a relative way. And basically what's important about this graph is the end of these 2 lines, the thick orange line and the thick blue line. This blue line was over the top of this threshold, and it's close to going back up there. That's the kind of thing that would take our meter into that purple setting, because we would really be indicating that we're overwhelming all hospital capacity. Likewise, the orange line continues to creep up, and it's moving towards full capacity as well. So the hospitals are absolutely filling up, and we're getting really close to the end of our potential capacity there. And this is what the risk meter looks like in terms of the overall score. And I think what you can see is that since early November, we've been kind of bouncing up and down, up in this very high zone, right below this purple. And so now is the time to continue to stay strong, keep the masks on, keep social distancing, keep thinking about these guidelines, and working to help our hospital workers and everyone in this community to get through this and make it through till we can all, get the vaccine. I'd like at this point to turn it over to Aditya Nair, who can tell us about the prediction for next week. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Can I get permission to screen share, please? Thank you. Thank you guys for being here, and I appreciate you guys taking the time and spreading the information out to the public. There are some things that I want to discuss before we go to the prediction for the week. First thing is to show how our predictive performance has been. So I'm going to just zoom in to the last week's data and then show you how we are doing versus what the prediction is doing. So in this chart, basically you see I'm comparing the prediction performance. So there are two model runs that I'm showing you. On the left is one model run, and on the right is another one. Now, the difference between these two runs is what is the initial data available to the model. So on the left, the blue circle that you see is the data available to the model. That was at December 13. And I'm predicting, of course, over this week, which is from December 13 to December 20th. And on the right, the model run shows basically the data that was fed into the model, which is this blue dot again, which was on December 15th. And all of my red dots are my predicted risk scores based on the prediction meter. Now, so you can see on the left also, the red dots are the predicted risk score. So because it was last week, we can compare how we did. And you can see that initially with this model run for the first 3 days, we went down. And then the model predicted that it's going to rise. But before I say that, this, the blue square box is what the true data is, or what is the true risk score that Jeremy was showing us, just zoomed in over this past week. So you can see the red dots are like bang on in terms of, in agreement, and then you see this rise. But the magnitude of the rise is underestimated by the model on the left. Now, on the right, of course, I have more data. So I expect that my prediction accuracy would be more. And that's exactly what you see. So what you see here, again, is a really good agreement in terms of, the red dots with the blue dots. And you can see that, all the model has available is the data on 15th. And you can see this rise in the model score and like saturating at 13. So you see that. And so now you would ask the question, why are we seeing this surge? So I want to point, so this is again, the data from 15 December to 20 December. So I'm basically pointing this model out, and I'm just showing you two indicators. The first indicator I'm showing you on the left is the risk assessment score. And you can see that the risk assessment score is going down, just like what Jeremy indicated, like the new daily cases, as well as the, the number of people seeking a COVID test, that's going down, but that is above 400. So it is still maxing out on the score for that, for the risk assessment. Now, this is the more concerning score, and this is what has flipped the script. I believe, which is the total ICU bed use. So you can see 80% is what the threshold is for the model. As soon as it crosses 80%, the model, will give a max score, or not a max score, actually a medium score to this. Over 90% is going to max out this metric. So just like Jeremy was saying, we are 0.5 away, and that's, I'll show you in a bit what's going to happen this week. But again, you can see that we predict this rise in the the ICU bed use, and actually the rise is even more in the true data, which is really, really concerning. So I would say ICU bed use is the one to monitor. Now, where are we heading? At least the meter for now shows that we are through the week, we are going to be in this very high risk score category. Now, but I do want to point you out again to this ICU bed use, which is showing that I mean, it's not stopping, and Dr. Hess will talk about it more, but this is a cumulative thing. So it's keeping on rising, and if there are more people in the hospital, for this to saturate, it's pretty hard. So I would say, you see this upward trend, as well as the hospitalization is again showing it's in the upper 89s. So you can see as this will cross 90, and if this crosses 90, the healthcare system would be extremely, extremely strained. So this is what is at least the predictive meter is showing. I want to, of course, point you, this is a prediction. We are trying to, of course, validate the model, get better confidence. That's why I showed you the previous 2 slides, just to show that we are heading towards more confidence in what the model is. But I want to summarize with 3 main points that I want to draw on. That the hospitalization and bed use seem to be increasing at a fast pace, putting tremendous strain on the healthcare system. The risk assessments seem to have gone down. Now, I don't know if it is just conjecture at this point, but Dr. Heather Kervin had some beautiful insights during our subcommittee meeting why that is the case. And what we are seeing is also the meter predicts a rise in the risk assessments for this week. Now, because it's holiday season, people are going to travel, like Jeremy mentioned, you're going to have more people seeking tests. So it's also indicating that's going to rise. So that's what the summary is. I thank you all for listening. I want to turn it over to Mayor Shivi.
All right, thank you. All right, Dr. Ariel, did you want to add anything with the predictive? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Well,
I want to thank Dr. Nair for a really great presentation, and he's worked very, very hard on the math. I'm personally very pleased to see that our tool has become further refined and is actually providing some pretty good accuracy over the past few weeks. There's still some tweaking that we have to do, some refining that we have to do to make the predictive tool a little more accurate. Obviously, feeding it more data makes it better. But I'm personally very, very pleased about the accuracy and how well this tool has performed. But we'll continue working on it and making it better and more accurate.
all right, fantastic. Yeah, it's impressive. Like I said, I've looked for other predictive models. I have not seen any in the country, so I'm impressed. Right here out of Reno, Nevada, guys. Good job. Okay, I'm going to send it over to you, Dr. Hess. You always have some incredible insight. Give us an idea of what you're seeing in your practice. And it was really interesting to you last night talking about sort of those critical care measures too that you're involved with. And so I don't know if you can speak on that, but maybe also after some remarks, maybe talk a little bit about that process. So go ahead, Dr. Hess.
Thank you, Mayor Shivi. I think it's interesting looking at those models, and it's sort of traditionally when we were getting into this is, test positivity, people seeking tests, the actual test rates were fairly predictive of, we would then see hospitalizations and then unfortunately, ultimately deaths, which is exactly what's happened. What I think people need to understand is that once the people are in the hospitals, these people are generally very sick, and traditionally it has taken much longer for them to get out of the hospital than other illnesses. If you compare it to people who are hospitalized for the flu, for instance, typically a COVID patient's in the hospital for twice as long as a flu patient. So even if we're seeing a downswing and seeing lower numbers of people getting COVID, which is a good thing, I don't want to minimize that. It means that people, hopefully we're doing a really good job over Thanksgiving, minimizing their contacts, trying not to gather in groups, and doing all the things that we're asking them to do, because there's already all these people in the hospital, and it's very hard to get them well enough to get out of the hospital, or unfortunately, they ultimately die. They're stacking on top of each other. And as I think Jeremy pointed out, we're still even though we've seen these trends down, there's a reason that there's these thresholds at like 400 and number of cases per day. I can't remember exactly what the threshold level is for the highest level, but it's we're still above those. So even though the numbers have come down, so you can make a logical conclusion that even though the number of people coming in has lessened, it's still too high. It's still putting too much burden. And so the hospitals are still feeling incredibly stressed. Dr. Brett Fry, who is with Renown ER, was on our call last night. And, it's a very difficult situation in the hospitals right now. The other thing, when you look at those capacity numbers, you have to realize some of that also, we've expanded a lot of capacity, whether it's the garage. He was talking about Monaco Ridge. There's, as I mentioned, I think on last week's call, we're doing some home monitoring that would normally take place in the hospital, where people are on monitors and oxygen at home. So, I credit our healthcare system for making all these changes. Respiratory therapists that would normally take care of 1 or 2 patients on a ventilator are now taking care of 10. These ratios are limited, though. There's not an unlimited capacity. And even though I think our nation's done a good job of creating more ventilators, for instance, we still have to have people to be able to run those ventilators. And so, staffing is still a major, major concern. I think because California's in crisis mode, the ability to pull in traveling nurses, for instance, is exceptionally limited. And it's not just California. I mean, this is all over the country. So the hospitals are really in a tough spot. And just to touch on, Mayor Sheevy had mentioned crisis standards of care. I've been involved in some of those communications with this, and to kind of lay it out for people, it's a 3-tiered process. And in the first tier, you do staffing changes. So you have people starting to take care of more people than they normally would. And you can do that for a while. But at a certain point, if there's too many patients, you can't. The next step is something called SOFA scoring, which is where a score is generated on not just COVID patients, on every patient in the hospital. And that SOFA score is based off of critical data such as vital signs like blood pressure, if they're on medicines to improve their blood pressure, if they're on oxygen supplementation or on a ventilator, and what those oxygen requirements are. It's based on certain critical labs, based on kidney function, liver function, heart function, etc. And that score is fairly predictive of overall survival rate. The ultimate step we're not there yet, but we are on step 2. The hospitals are doing SOFA scoring on all patients at this time. The next step is where there is a group that's independent that basically gets those scores and then turns those scores into rankings, and patients are ranked. And then based on your ranking, you would either get invasive care, an ICU bed or a ventilator, versus potentially comfort care only. And those decisions are made not on any demographics. So the people who are making those decisions, they don't have any information other than a score. They don't know the patient's name. They don't know their sex. They don't know their race. All they have is a score. And so it's a very objective system, but it's also a very, it's a battlefield type situation. Now, we're in the process where those things are in place. I'm not saying they're being done. Okay. So please don't take it to that next step. But I will tell you that hospitals are phase 1. Yes. Critical care. They're expanding phase 2, SOFA scoring, to be prepared in the event that we tip over, because despite everything we're seeing, if this upward trend continues, and if the holidays, Christmas and subsequently New Year's, do lead to another spike, that's what will happen if the hospitals are overwhelmed. Just to paint a bleak picture. Now, fortunately, we didn't see this massive spike after Thanksgiving, and I truly believe that's because people listened. People, really minimize. It's all about human contact, right? It's all about the number of contacts that you have in a closed space over a period of time. And if you can minimize those, so just with your immediate family, try not to go out as much as possible. Obviously, if you are out, wear a mask diligently. All of those things are exceptionally important. So these 2 weeks, these next 2 weeks, I cannot emphasize how critical these next 2 weeks are, because January is, is going to be the break tail month with this. Even though we've got the vaccine, you've got to realize, as hopeful as we all are for the vaccine, it takes at least a month for enough people to get vaccinated to have even a glimmer of improvement in this, because it's, we can only vaccinate so many people at this time because of the supply issue. And so, I don't want to say that in a month things are going to be better, but the month of January, the vaccines will have no impact on the month of January. It's all about our individual behavior for the month of January. Absolutely.
I think those are great points, Dr. Hess, and stressing that we will not see any effects of the vaccine, in January. So I think that's really, it's interesting, that critical care too, the standards. And I also thought it was really interesting that it's not your treating physician that makes those decisions. So you have to really remove yourself when you're sort of trying to figure out, and I hate to say this, who lives or dies, correct?
Yeah, so I figure there might be a few questions on that third stage there. Yeah, it's an independent group. They're confidential. Their names are not released to the public. They're all clinicians. They work in 12-hour shifts in groups of 3 in case of a tie, 2 out of 3. And they have very, very strict criteria, and they're being fed data directly from the hospitals. This also obviously means the hospitals are in coordination with one another so that we are truly out of resources. You certainly don't want to activate that system if, hospital A has some extra capacity still. So, but this is a community-wide initiative. So it's every hospital is involved, I will say that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Wow, just tough. All right, we're going to head over to Dr. Winchell, and I'm excited to say, Dr. Hess, I know you have a date for the vaccine. I think you've highlighted it in big date, so
Yeah.
So we're excited.
Dr. Winchell has already been vaccinated herself,
Yeah.
which
So-
is awesome, and my date is December 29th, so I'm coming up.
Okay. Well, good. There you go. Good Christmas gift, right? Okay, Dr. Winchell, we are excited that you've had your vaccine. I'd love to know a little bit about how you're feeling after the vaccine. Give us sort of some insight.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everybody for having me. I did receive my vaccine on Friday afternoon, and I can tell you, I am so grateful to receive it. And that message is amongst all of my fellow colleagues. It was just a beautiful gift to receive. And I'd love to walk you through the process, and maybe that will provide some reassurance to those on the phone. And I hope that reassurance can maybe kind of promote you to send that message to somebody else, because I think when you hear a positive message about the vaccine process, you could actually affect someone else's decision to maybe take that vaccine down the road when it comes to their turn. So I received the vaccine, like I mentioned, on Friday afternoon, registered. The hospital system that I work for was wonderful, and I can tell you it was painless. I didn't feel anything, and well, I did feel one thing. I was just elated, just happiness. And I've never felt like that before. And it was pure joy. Some of the things that I think are really important when we talk about vaccinations, it's about asking questions, taking the time to read the information that is available, because I feel like in our community and across the nation, if we take the time to educate ourselves, we really can make the best informed decision for ourselves and our family. Some of the side effects that you might actually experience after receiving the vaccine, or soreness at the injection site. Often people will actually have, feel like they kind of worked out for maybe 24 hours. The other thing some patients may feel are low-grade fever, body aches, as well as fatigue. And it's important that I mention that those symptoms are temporary, and the overall benefit that you receive even having, those mild symptoms, it's definitely worth it. And so I really encourage everyone to educate, read, ask questions, and really consider getting the vaccine. And I want to mention it was a beautiful gift, and I'm grateful that I get to help my community. I love where I live. I was born here, and to be able to receive the opportunity to have a vaccine that so many people want and be on the front lines was just an amazing gift.
Wow, so much gratitude. That's amazing. So Dr. Winchell, can I just ask you this? Is it very much like the flu vaccine? Many of us get the flu vaccine and we do experience sort of a sore arm and then maybe have some of those same symptoms. Would you equate it to very much like getting the flu vaccine?
Yes, I would. Exactly. If anything, I felt like it was less painful than the flu vaccine, which was very surprising to me. So exactly, it's the same.
Okay, fantastic. And also because you are right there on the front line, literally, give us an idea of what you're seeing, what you're experiencing. Last night you actually had a story. I think we were just kind of, surprised sort of still how people might not understand how contagious this virus is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and also some ways that we need to probably take extra precaution.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we are seeing, especially in the urgent care, patients are actually delaying care. And so by that, what I mean is they'll have the symptoms, maybe 3 to 7 days. And normally, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, we would see them actually come and seek care. But now, because there's so much fear and anxiety about seeking care, whether it's in an urgent care setting or in the hospital, the fear is, will I contract COVID? And so unfortunately, if they are experiencing shortness of breath, fatigue, weakness, they will enter the urgent care. And because of the severity of their symptoms, we actually have to transfer them to the emergency room. And I want to give you an experience that I mentioned, I think last night. One patient told me her fear was, number one, like I mentioned, contracting COVID. The other fear is, if I'm admitted, will my family members be able to come in and see me? And then the third one, which is just heartbreaking, will I walk out of the hospital? And I think those are all things that are important and are a part of patients' decision making when it comes to seeking care. And so all of those things are cumulative in that decision to seek care. And so that can really make a difference if someone, is able to recover sooner because they seeked care in an earlier time period when their symptoms presented versus later on. And so that's what we're seeing in the urgent care.
Interesting. So let me just ask you this. I think that's what a lot of people have a hard time balancing. When is the right time to go? Because there was a message, stay home if you have it, and just sort of watch your symptoms. But as a physician, this is to Dr. Hess and Dr. Winchell, when would you say is the right time to go? And also, would you recommend that everyone that could get a hold of a pulse ox maybe have one? Is that a good idea?
So, for everybody, it's a little different. I think the important thing is to really take kind of an assessment of your past medical history, because if you have additional comorbidities, hypertension, COPD, that really elevates when you should actually seek care. But the common things are, if you have an elevated temperature that is not responding to Tylenol or ibuprofen, generalized weakness where you're not able to really, walk from your bedroom to your door, or decrease in appetite where you have not been able to eat or drink, all of those things can really cause an effect where you really should seek care as soon as possible. And I'll let Dr. Hess chime in as well.
Good points on the Tylenol. So if Tylenol is not doing the trick, then you know that that's problematic.
Correct.
Okay, great points. Dr. Hess.
I just to reemphasize, I think those are some really good points. I think your underlying health history really does somewhat determine, how quickly should you seek care. We do have the new monoclonal antibody therapy. Getting that up and running has been a challenge. for a variety of logistical reasons, but for folks who are certainly 65 plus, who have any kind of underlying health conditions, if you think you've got COVID, you should get checked out. I think that's probably just the rule of thumb. The other part of it, and you asked about the pulse ox. I think if you have symptoms and you can get a pulse ox, it's not a bad thing to have. I mean, I think if you see that oxygen level dropping below 92 and certainly below 90, because some people can present not feeling as short of breath as you think they should be. But there may be limitations on getting that. So symptoms do matter too. You know, most patients who are sick enough to go to the hospital do have significant shortness of breath. So that's a really big red flag, no matter whatever your age is. If you're really struggling to get your breath, you need to get seen. Dr. Curry Winchell also had mentioned a story last night about a business owner here in town where they had symptoms, they kept going to work, and then now they have multiple people from that business who are infected. So the other part of this, if you are sick, you need to stay home. Even if you wear a mask, if you're still sick, the mask is not 100%. So, I do want to reemphasize that's really an important part of this too. People who are having symptoms are more infectious. So please keep that in mind too.
Mm-hmm. Good
Thank
point.
you, Dr. Hess, for mentioning that. That was definitely disheartening, as you mentioned. So that one patient has now affected the entire business. And so I think it's really important to, think of your actions, because not only does it affect you, it affects your entire community.
Yeah, interesting. Right. All right. Thanks, you guys. Tremendous comments. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to send it back to you, Matt. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can handle it, Mayor.
Okay, John, go
Yeah,
right
no
ahead.
worries. All right, guys, we're going to start opening it up to the media. We'll just go down the list as always. We've got Ben with Channel 4. Go ahead.
Hey,
Hello,
Ben.
everyone. Hey, guys. Another question on the this independent group that would be ranking patients. I guess I would just be curious, what would have to happen before we get to that point? Is that the 90% threshold that you guys were talking about? And how soon could we potentially be there if current trends continue?
Good question. Okay, Dr. Hess.
It's really dependent on the hospitals. And so that's really a question that would have to go to the hospital and the hospital administrators, as far as, they're monitoring their capacity on a hour by hour basis, to be honest with you. And so, they're stretching their capacity as much as possible. So the people who are involved on the back end, that sort of triage committee, so to speak, they're just notified by the hospital systems when it's time or this gets enacted. So to be honest, I don't know when it's a question I've actually had, is when do you guys decide, that we're at this point? And I think it's truly when they're out of either people or they're out of machinery. And that's, like I said, I wish I could give you a hard number as far as, those percentages. I think the challenge with those percentages, they do change based on how well the hospitals can expand their capacity. So there's no one number that I think is going to tip this. And we're not there yet. I mean, it's really just in a very being prepared state right now.
Thank you.
All right, good stuff. We'll go to Bob Conrad.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, how you guys doing? Just a real quick question. I know the last meeting, I forget if that was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, but we talked about hitting that purple peak within a day or two. Did we do that? And if so, what happened? I know you kind of went through that at the beginning, but if not, then what happened? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jeremy. I could start that one off. We'd never have actually hit above a score of 13. So we never moved into the 13.5 score. There was a bit of a stabilization in hospitalizations and ICU bed use that happened right after that prediction was made. And I mean, some of it we think is due to the fact that, as Dr. Hess mentioned, I mean, the hospitals are doing an amazing job of managing what's going on. And so trying to avoid getting to that stage. Also, we think, folks are to some degree following the guidelines and changing their behavior, and that's helping. But the grim reality also is that the death rate has gone up. The number of deaths, maybe not the rate, but the number of deaths has certainly increased as of late. And that also has an impact on capacity. It does free up beds, but it's not a happy way, obviously.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll go Brian Hoffman next.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, taking a look at that risk meter, talking about we are just that 0.5 away from going into that severe range. I know we did talk about the beds opening up because of deaths last week in our meeting, but are we still seeing that same type of trend? Are we seeing beds being empty because of deaths, and that's kind of what is still keeping it on that brink of going into severe? And then coming up for the Christmas holiday, I mean, knowing that we are just that half a tick away from this severe range, what would you recommend to the public when it comes to Christmas gatherings?
Well, I would just take the first part of that if I could in terms of the deaths. We're still seeing significant numbers of deaths daily, and we're also still seeing hospitalizations and ICU bed use go up. So the level of mortality is not enough to stop the trend. And if the trend continues, even with the mortality, then I think we will be heading into that when we're really overwhelming the capacity and those things, we will probably hit that purple setting. Then to the other point for guidelines, I think I turn it over to the medical folks.
Sure. I think that the guidelines still haven't changed. And it's still exceptionally important to try to minimize your contacts outside of your own household. When you go out, you want to do it for the least amount of time with the least number of people, wearing your mask diligently, and washing your hands, maintaining your distance. All of those things are exceptionally important, particularly over this next holiday season. And we're just keeping our fingers crossed that people continue to do those things, because it does make a big difference, and we've got to try to slow that influx of patients coming into the hospital.
And I did have one other quick follow-up question. I'm not sure if this is something we could maybe talk about in weeks to come, but once the vaccine does become widely available, what's the big difference between the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, and what should people look out for when they choose, if they can choose, which one they get?
Well, I can take that question. The two are based on the same technology. We're talking messenger RNA. As you know, we have double-stranded DNA in our bodies. Messenger RNA contains instructions to build proteins and other things that we need. And what both these vaccines do is to inject a little bit of messenger RNA that's engineered to create spike protein. They enter your cells, they deliver instructions to make that spike protein, and then the messenger RNA then degrades because your body's at 98 degrees. And remember that mRNA is preserved in cold, super cold freeze for those vaccines. And at that point, your body's immune system, your B cells and your T cells say, oh, well, there's some spike protein, let's attack. And so then your body has a rehearsal where the immune system attacks the spike protein and prepares for the real thing. And so when you're actually attacked by a real coronavirus, then you will have the correct antibodies, and your T cells will be ready, and they will suppress symptoms so that you won't get sick. Both vaccines work on the same technology. It's been under development for 13 years or more, and 70,000 volunteers took the shots, and they show efficacy of 94 to 95%, and very, very safe vaccines. Being allergic, having allergic reaction to them is incredibly rare. It's I think you'd get hit by an asteroid before you'd actually have a a very bad reaction to this vaccine, although a few people have had that. And so that's what they are. The third vaccine that's coming that may be approved in February uses a different technology, uses a little more traditional approach to vaccines. But these two right now are basically the same in how they work.
Okay, fantastic. We'll go to Lucia next.
Hey, I think this is a question for Dr. Hess, I guess. So there are 3 stages of the critical care, and then we are currently in stage 2, and that includes already just kind of essentially like assigning a score for every patient right now in case we have to switch to that stage 3.
Yes, that is correct. So that it's crisis standards of care. It's a standard document. It's with the governor's office. Actually, it's a state plan. It was actually developed here in Washoe County, but was approved for the entire state. And when you're in that next stage, it's called SOFA scoring, SOFA, and it's a standard, well-documented criteria that is used to rank or to create a score based on patients' clinical metrics.
Thanks. And I guess quickly as a follow-up, once we hit that threshold, will all hospitals in Nevada switch over? And then I guess, can you also talk about, circling back to Ben's question, I know we don't have like a set date when this could happen, but I guess will it happen when all staffed hospital beds fill up? Because I know we have like the 1,400 in Renown's parking garage, but not enough staff to take care of folks.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky in that, yeah, staff beds are part of it, but probably more important would be critical care beds, in part because you only have certain individuals and certain equipment that can be used for those critical care beds, whether it be specific monitoring that's needed invasively when we're monitoring people's blood pressure and things with monitors inside their bodies, when we're, certainly if they're on ventilators or high flow oxygen. It's those critical beds, and that's where our limitation probably would come from first. And one of the things that actually I'd heard is that there are critical care beds in the community that are designed for other populations, whether that be pediatrics. So you can't always go 100%. So when you see critical care beds, some of these beds include beds that could not ever be used for adult patients. So that was explained a while back too. So that goes back to, you can't just look strictly at those percentages that are produced by the Nevada Hospital Association, because sometimes they reflect the reality, but not necessarily what the capacity is for the patients that would need this kind of care.
Thank you.
Great. And Stanton? Anything there, Stan, or are you good? All right, one final ask for anybody, just real quick, if there's anything.
John, the only thing I would like to just reiterate again is that I think people have to understand this is modifying everyone's behavior, because there's that piece of it too, that if you are in a car accident or have a cardiac arrest or something to that nature, because our hospitals are so stressed, it can affect the level of care that you receive. It's not just COVID. So I really want to stress that to people, to be thinking about their behavior and also why it is so important, to maybe modify that behavior in case you should have a medical event that's not COVID related, that you're also doing your part in helping our healthcare system sort of get that breather. If we could all do this together, whether you're concerned about COVID or not, you should be concerned about other medical events that you possibly could have that could put you in the hospital, that therefore, because it's so stressed and strained, that it could affect the level of care that you receive. So again, I think that's another reason that people need to also pay extra attention to how we are sort of living our life and how we sort of view this, whether you believe that, we've heard that some people say they don't believe that the virus is real. Well, you know, other medical events are very real as well. So I think everyone needs to understand this affects all of us in any capacity. So I just want to stress that.
Good stuff. And Kristen and Frank, apologies for missing you there. Do either of you have anything?
The change in the amount of vaccine that's coming to Nevada, how does that affect the plans for distributing the vaccine?
Dr. Hess?
Yeah, you know, I know the health department's adjusting on the fly based off of the amount of vaccine that they're getting. I think the Moderna shipment is a fairly good quantity. I know that the Pfizer shipment was decreased. The hope is that by next week, the Pfizer shipments will be back to the amounts that they were originally supposed to. So I know that all the health systems are still scheduling, like myself, to get vaccinated in the coming weeks. So at least all of our sort of frontline healthcare workers can get vaccinated, certainly by sometime in January, and then moving on through the various tiers. There was some communication last night that in tier 2, because they may be changing that criteria a little bit, so that folks that are in the older population, the 75 plus, may move up in that tier. I think that was the newest guidelines with the CDC. So you may see some adjustments in tier 2, but my understanding is tier 1 is staying the same. And the hope is that between Pfizer and Moderna together, we can get the folks in tier 1 vaccinated in a timely manner.
All right, good stuff. And Kristen, did you have anything?
Hi, yeah, so I'm with the Reno Gazette-Journal. I was just wondering if there was anything planned to support smaller businesses or organizations as the CARES Act is set to expire soon. So if there were any plans to support them or any nonprofits, I'm curious to know.
Yeah, great question. Well, one of the things is, look, we're now seeing that there's going to be some extension, which is really great. That'll give us time to sort of look at the funds in what capacity. And we really want to help our small businesses. As you know, at 25%, many of them are really struggling. And so the council has been very dedicated to do that. And so we will continue to look at it. We're in a break. Everyone's still working, but we're in a break from council meetings right now, and we don't go back until January. But it's certainly a conversation that we're having with our city manager and talking about what more can we do to get money into their hands. And we think that that's, one of our top priorities is helping our businesses stay afloat, because we know that that's the best thing for our economy. I think, again, I keep saying this is going to be a really tough winter. And then I think that, we start to see the light. We were talking to Dr. Azam last night, all of us were, and my question was, when do you start to think that we'll see the effects of this vaccine and start to see the light? Because as this vaccine rolls out, more and more people will feel more comfortable, as you know, to sort of be out and about, which obviously will help our economy. So we were kind of trying to figure out, when do you think that we might start to see a little reprieve? And, I think March, April, coming into, these months. And so we know right now it's going to be the most difficult time for our businesses. Absolutely, probably the most difficult that we have seen. So we've got to do whatever we can. So we've got to make sure at the city, what funds do we have available, but it's certainly in our top priority to help our small businesses.
All right, fantastic, everyone. As always, if you have any need for this recording or any follow-up questions, just shoot Matt or I an email. And yeah, this was great. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a happy holiday this weekend and enjoy being socially distant and safe.
Yeah, and wear your mask. Wear your mask. Wear your mask. All right, bye, you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks for your
Thank
time.
you.